everybody, and welcome to Let's Do Lunch. Today is Thursday, which is our RightsTech Roundtable, and we have a terrific group of speakers today. My name is Ned Sherman. I'm a partner at Manat, Phelps & Phillips, where I head the digital and technology team. I am also a co-founder of Digital Media Wire, which is the producer of Let's Do Lunch. I want to welcome everybody today and invite you to introduce yourselves too. You can do that by going to the chat on the bottom nav and select the drop down everyone and let us know who's here, who's in the house today. You're also welcome to chat with folks in the chat throughout the show. If you have questions for the panelists today, please put them in the Q&A area just to the left of the chat so it's easy for everybody to, or for the panelists to see your questions. This session runs till 45 past the hour, wherever you happen to be in the world. And without further ado, let me introduce Paul Sweeting. Paul is the CEO of Concurrent Media. He's also co-founder of RightsTech Project and will be our moderator today. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Ned. Hello, everyone. Glad you could join us today. Let me say at the top that I'm suffering from the remnants of a cold. So if you hear me sniffling or sneezing, it's not because of the company, it's because of me. We do have what I think will be a very interesting conversation, one I'm certainly looking forward to today. Before we get to that, a couple of headline items of note. Late last week, the European Union Council, which is made up of representatives from member state governments, separate from the European Commission and separate from the European Parliament, which is an elected body. But the EU Council and the European Parliament have reached a provisional agreement, at least on the terms of the Digital Markets Act. This is sort of the third big piece of legislation, regulation that the EU has rolled out in the last couple of years, focused as part of their digital single market initiative. The other two pieces being the Digital Services Act and the EU Copyright Directive. The latest enactment, the Digital Markets Act, it's actually a regulatory regime, and it applies to major online gatekeepers, or what it defines as gatekeepers, and it defines those based on annual revenue and market cap, and it covers it's primarily aimed at the likes of Meta, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, and the others. And basically what it says is they will no longer be able to rank their own products or services above those of other operators, other providers looking to reach the audience that those gatekeepers keep behind the gate. They also can't require the use of any particular service or system, such as a payment system. So that's a significant blow to app stores like the Apple App Store, which typically require app providers to work exclusively through Apple's payment system, from which it takes its 30% VIG. It includes a significant enforcement mechanism, which can include up to 20%, a fine of 20% of the platform's annual global revenue. That is for repeat infringers. First offenders, they can face a fine of 10% of their global income. But when we're talking about companies of the size of Apple, Google, and Facebook, that's can be a pretty hefty chunk of change. It still requires a formal vote by the European Parliament, but that's at this point considered largely pro forma. And the expectation is that this will be in place and will be in effect as of October of this year. And so together, these three pieces, the Copyright Directive, the Digital Services Act, and now the Digital Markets Act, pretty significantly rewrite the sort of rules of engagement between online platform providers and other service and product providers, including media services. The media companies are very excited about this. And similar to what happened with the EU's GDPR, the digital data regulation, the data privacy regulation that went into effect a couple of years ago, this could well become a de facto global standard for the rules of engagement between platforms and content and service providers. So that's definitely something to watch. And there are already movements along these lines here in the US. Last week, the US Justice Department came out with an endorsement of a bill that is pending on Capitol Hill that would add significant new antitrust regulation on platforms here. So the times they are changing, at least on the surface, it seems that way. The other notable development this week was that the Copyright Royalty Board here in the US rejected the proposed agreement between the big three labels and the National Music Publishers Association, the NMPA, which, not incidentally, the two entities include many of the same companies, but the CRB rejected their proposed deal to freeze the mechanical royalty rate for physical media and for digital downloads at 9.1 cents. So that was a somewhat controversial deal. There were accusations of self-dealing and various types of insider skullduggery, and the CRB specifically cited the lack of transparency into how this deal was put together, and so they've rejected it. So I guess that means the fight or the battle over the future level of the mechanical royalty rate will resume with no clear indication at this point as to how much longer that will go on. So speaking of battles and fights, one of the areas that the music streaming business has been battling with for many years is the proliferation of fraudulent or manipulated streaming data, which can lead to royalties being paid where they should not be and not being paid where they should be. And our guests today, I'd like to invite Morgan Hayduk and Andrew Batey, the co-founders and co-CEOs of Beatdapp, to join us.
Hey, Paul.
There we go. Morgan has had a background in the communications as well as in the entertainment industries. He, while a communications executive, represented Music Canada, which is the trade association for the big three labels up in Canada. He was involved in the passage of the significant Copyright Act. What was that, 2 years ago, maybe, Morgan?
I think it was passed in budget 2014. 15. We started working on it in 2012.
And that was a significant sort of pro-copyright change in Canadian copyright law. And he joins us today from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Morgan.
Thanks for having us.
And Andrew is normally in Los Angeles, but at the moment he's in Memphis, Tennessee, where I understand he's been hiding out from tornadoes the last day, on his way to spend some time in Nashville. And Andrew has a background. He's been a technology executive primarily, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. And he has a background in technology applications in the entertainment, the media, the healthcare, and the direct-to-consumer categories, and has been involved in helping to raise as much as $50 million for various tech startups and ventures. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks. Also, everyone's weird crypto friend. So
And everyone's weird crypto friend.
I'm the crypto oracle. I feel like I get nonstop text messages about different projects. So.
Well, I don't think we're going to be talking too much crypto today, although it's not out of the question that it will come up. So Beatdapp, tell the audience, give them the elevator pitch of what Beatdapp set out to do and what it's been doing lately.
Cool. I can give you the quick summary. So we started the business 2018, although we worked quietly in sort of stealth mode for about 18 months. So there was no real public trace of what we were doing. And we really started it after speaking to some folks on the label side about the challenge with auditing at scale and just being able to enforce their audit rights across the sort of proliferation of platforms the world over. And so that challenge is interesting because, I mean, historically, if you think about an audit, it's bringing in a consulting firm and it's matching up records of sales reports to the underlying data. And in a streaming context, that's billions and trillions of lines of code, and it becomes almost impossible to do it at the scale of the number of services that you'd like to look at. So we started by building technology in that lane and have a fairly mature product in the space. But one of the things that we discovered along the way was that one of the underlying challenges in auditing was actually backing out what was fraud. And so as we spoke to platforms in particular, we heard many variations on the same theme, which is that we have a growing problem with streaming fraud, manipulation, spin juicing, whatever you want to call it. But it's going largely in a lot of cases undetected, not for lack of trying, but honestly just for lack of the dedicated resources to really dig in on this stuff. And the sort of knowledge, I think, that across platforms, it's better to have a look, across multiple data sets than only in one platform's data exclusively. And so when we heard that, it sort of was a light bulb moment for Andrew and I and our third co-founder, who thankfully is on vacation this week, much deserved, so we're not bothering him. But to build something around fraud detection, because we realized really quickly that if we could back out what was suspicious from reporting, we could zero in on what was left for the audit as well. So that was really the genesis of the business. We spent a lot of time speaking with labels and streaming services about how to sort of get this product to market, and I think there's a pretty clear need that we've, I think the conversation is at a point right now where it's more prevalent in the industry than I've seen in a long time, and so we're really trying to jump in there and make sure that there's something to offer.
So let's put some meat on the definition of fraud here. What exactly are we talking about? What dubious practices are the main problem that you're trying to address here, or problems?
There's different buckets. I think the two biggest ones are financial fraud and then sort of a perception-based, or I said motivations, I should say, for buckets, like financial motivation and sort of a perception-based motivation. From a perception-based motivation, they're really just trying to either ramp up their plays, they being artists or management or people around them, independent artists specifically, who are trying to get noticed, or big artists who are trying to maintain sort of the perception that they're number one or within charts or stay relevant. And so what you end up having is this sort of perception-based motive for fraud, which is, how do I get my stream counts higher to either maintain my position or break out and get noticed? And there's also this sort of element to that, like, if I can just get noticed enough to get onto playlist, maybe my song will naturally take off. So there's this sort of natural hustle to it, which is really just, trying to win or beat the system. There's also financial based fraud,
which is kind of an old story in the music industry, right? I mean,
for sure.
That was fundamentally the motivation behind a lot of payola, right? It was trying to break acts or break records by goosing their plays through various types of incentives.
For sure. And the other thing though is like, in the past, I guess there's always a financial incentive, but generally speaking, I would say, and my perception of the past, I wasn't necessarily around for all of that time, but I would say that my perception of the past is that you were trying to break an artist because you're building a brand around the artist and you're trying to get them recognized and build like tour dates and all the other stuff that comes with just getting an artist to break. Whereas I would say nowadays in a consumption-based model, there's a direct financial incentive to also playing streams. So your artist doesn't necessarily have to break. You can actually just generate massive amounts of streams on music or IP and reap benefits of financial benefit directly. So you see that a lot with these sophisticated bot networks. There's all kinds of crazy ways to defraud the system. I'm sure we can go. I'm happy to go deep here. Like one way is to, like, we know of companies that are literally shipping pallets of computers to different cities, and they'll be in high IP traffic areas like hotels, coffee shops. These computers can be given out for free with a centralized command center somewhere else in a different place, where it's like, tell these bots, half premium users, half free users, or a randomized mix to target these playlists. Now, if I'm doing the full control, full integration stack, meaning I'm owning the actual bots themselves, I have to now create a bunch of noise around me, because if I'm only targeting Morgan to make Morgan the most popular, boy band, he loves boy bands. But if I was, targeting Morgan specifically to make him the most popular pop singer, I would need to create a haystack around that needle to blend him in so it's not noticeable. So I might drive 1 million plays to Morgan and 100 million plays to unsuspecting artists who don't know. So the knock-on effect of me trying to create fraud is quite large. And so from that perspective, you just have this ripple effect of fraud. And every time that I'm trying to make Morgan more popular and make it mimic real life, like I might start Morgan's career in this fraudulent hypothetical situation in Baltimore, then move it to DC, Miami. I might put a fake tour thing out there to make it look like Morgan's touring and start building plays in all those different regions amongst my computers that I own. And I will have a whole network of millions of computers across the United States. I will also have network partners in different regions, so we can switch. Like, because I need to fill 100 million plays, I can't just fill it with Morgan. I might sell some of that to a partner in Europe or a partner in LATAM. And so I'm actually taking some of their fraudulent plays and mixing them in with mine, and they're doing the same for me so that Morgan can be in all these different countries. So you end up with this like network of fraudsters who have hardware, who are centralized command centering, and that's more of the old school way. You also can just build virtual computers on top of that to confuse the streaming services. So there's like a lot of, I can see your face, I'm probably going too crazy here, but that's just like one way. There's so many ways that we have found these sort of bot networks, hijacked accounts where I just steal.
But basically the primary motivations are either sort of old school manipulation of perception out there that this artist or this record is breaking.
Yeah.
Or straight up financial
fraud.
In that you're just trying to generate clicks to generate royalties that are not really due. And this is mostly machine operated. I mean, these are bots, or are there other vectors by which you can create fraudulent data?
Yeah, Morgan's got a good example about a guy. Go for it.
Well, no, yes, there's a lot of sort of bots or, computer sort of manufacturer generated activity, but there are also human click farms that are, go back to sort of digital advertising days, maybe not the first use case for, sort of human click farms, but one of the earliest ones. And there's an article in, I think it was in either Vice or another publication a few years back where they actually interviewed the employee of one of these places. And he was just describing how awful the conditions are, where he worked in, a hot sort of empty building. No one was allowed to listen to the music. So it was quiet and all you could hear was the sound of the clicking as they were moving between their daily targets of how many songs they had to listen to on various platforms and how many ads they had to like. And if you missed your targets, there was actually like some pretty awful punishment that would be doled out, including having your fan turned off. So there's a real human cost to this.
Sounds like Squid Games.
Yeah, it really was. It was really like it's a pretty awful read. And so I think there's obviously all the stakeholders that are affected that we can think of, many of which are probably on this call. But then there's actually like another group that's sort of abstracted away, but we want to make sure that they're recognized as well, because no one should have to work in that sort of condition.
So how large do you think this problem is on an industry level? I mean, are we talking, a few percentage of streams that are fraudulent? Or are we talking half the streams that are fraudulent? Where give me a ballpark.
Andrew's smiling because he and I have differing answers on this, mostly based on his earlier example of how if he were to work in this space, what he would do and how much volume you'd have to create to bury it. What we've heard from speaking to folks inside the industry is like it's in the 10% of all activity range, and some percentage of that is squeaking through caught, probably a material percentage of that. I think Andrew would say probably closer to like 20%, only because even if 5% is slipping through, you have to build a lot of noise around what you're actually targeting, and so the volume of, call it false positives or collateral damage or whatever you want to call it, the volume that squeezes through is actually quite a bit more significant. It's just buried among sort of popular music. So as my boy band's trying to break, NSYNC's getting the halo benefit of it.
So what data are you actually looking at to do what you do?
We look at all kinds of data. We've built the easy ones to detect are things like, hey, there's 3 million plays in an hour in a town of 2,000 people. Like that's obviously not normal. There's also pretty easy rules-based fraud you can check for, signals, I should say. So for example, if a battery on a phone, a mobile device never changes, it's 100% all the time, you pretty much suspect that phone of being plugged in on a wall. You can also use the gyroscope off of a phone and figure out that it hasn't moved ever. That's another indication. So sometimes it's what they're not doing that's a tell, more than what they actually are doing. So you have like lots of different sort of data related signals that way. But then you also check for a number of machine learning models and sort of regression analyses, and you try to figure out how they're all correlated and where they're coming from. And from that aspect, we've developed over 20 models specifically looking at different types of lenses for that. We'll be, I think, close to 100 models this year. And so it's like whack-a-mole. You find one way, they start changing it, you start closing it, you find another way.
Where are you getting these data from? I mean, are you collecting this all from DSPs, or are you looking at, adjacent sources of data for, to correlate?
Both, actually. So we get first-party data from streaming services directly. And so the first-party data is inclusive of the usage data itself, so what was listened to and the corresponding metadata. And then also the behavioral data of the user, which is what Andrew was referring to with, things like gyroscope and battery life, and just the way a user clicks through an application. And so there are tells in the data when the click patterns are too uniform and obviously not sort of human looking, for lack of a better term. And then there are patterns that emerge where there's just not enough behavior to justify the volume of streaming. So those are the two first-party sources. And then we also use third-party sources, touring data, atmospheric variables, just like public holidays, social sentiment, anything that we can do to sort of temperature check whether or not what's showing up in the first-party data makes sense with what's happening in the sort of broader world. So a good real example of that would be like when Fleetwood Mac blew up on TikTok with the Ocean Spray skateboarding video maybe a year and a half ago. The sort of corresponding streams of millennials listening to Dreams would have broken probably most models for normal usage. But if you knew about what happened on TikTok, it would make perfect sense. So we try to find third-party sources of data that help prove or disprove what the models show. And a big part of that is because like we're really concerned with false positives as much as we're concerned with actually finding fraud. And so to the extent that you can cross-check your analysis with the real world and what's happening sort of across the broader internet, we do that. So those are 2 buckets of data that we're pulling in.
And so how much of what you do could DSPs be doing themselves? I assume, at least the large platforms, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, must have their own systems in place to try to filter out what they can, no?
Yeah, I would say for a long time, for sure they can, and they definitely are trying to solve it. And I think the one you missed there would be Deezer. I'll throw Deezer some props there and say Deezer spends a lot of their time and effort on sort of trying to eradicate fraud. I would say that the natural issue is always going to be the siloed data effect, where they're looking for nuanced things in their own data, but they can't necessarily look for pattern recognition across services. And so even if they all build the exact same thing, they can all spend 10, 15, 20, 30 million dollars, but now you need to do that for every one of them is gonna have to build the exact same thing over and over again for their nuanced data set, looking at their data, and they won't be able to say, hey, this has a digital fingerprint that looks exactly like this other platform. And so the way I think about it, and the easiest way I kind of explain it to my mom, is that like when there's something called like biometric security, and like if you ever get asked to write a sentence on a laptop to type a sentence, it's because when you press a key and when you let up a key is unique to you. Like how fast you type and how you actually do that is like a fingerprint in itself. So if you type a sentence, I know that it's Morgan typing that sentence. And so the same thing can be pretty much done with listening, in that if the exact sequence of listening and the way that it's going and how, like between skips, between plays, and you see the same sequence, irregardless of what content they're targeting, you can pick up on a digital signature across platforms, even in an anonymized way where we don't know who that user is, and notify that platform and say, these look like pretty fraudulent plays. And so you couldn't do that if you're your own data set, your own silo. It's the same issue that people have in, click farms with ads, or with banking, how they send it to Verifin for financial fraud transactions. So we're that sort of view across pan industry that can build all these models and identify this nuanced level of fraud that they wouldn't be able to detect on their own.
So where are you guys with working with the DSPs? I mean, how many are you? I'm not asking you to give away anything proprietary, but are you plugged in with most of the major platforms out there that you're able to provide that sort of holistic 30,000-foot view?
No, but if you're listening in from a major platform, give us a call. We're plugged in with a few already, and many more in the pipeline. And I think our goal for the next couple of months is to take these first few that we're working with, turn those sort of insights into something that can be packaged up and really run through the industry and show the value. So we're in the sort of pilot phase with a handful already, and sort of moving to wider industry adoption sort of in the back half of this year is really our goal.
So would you say you're trying to sort of drive a standardization of fraud monitoring in the industry? Would that be fair, or is that a little too highfalutin for?
It's exactly fair. I think we have a target on our ideal here, like customer pipeline thoughts are around 20% of all like monthly active users streaming. So if we could hit that number, that to us, that's the number we're trying to run for right now. And I think that we have we want to set that standard. Exactly. We want to set the nomenclature by which everyone talks about fraud. Part of our dashboard and the things we provide back in analytics is like, this is the flag that it caused, and this is the definition of that flag, so that everyone kind of gets on the same page when they're discussing it with each other. And so there's a lot of sort of the standardization that we're sort of spearheading here for a lot of the DSPs.
And what is your business relationship with the DSPs? Are you, is it like a SaaS model? Is it a subscription service? How does that actually work?
Yeah, it's consumption-based billing, which allows a lot of flexibility for us and for the DSP as they grow. So I think Snowflake, the sort of data warehousing company, might have been one of the pioneers of the model, but basically allowing us to charge on a usage basis. So for everything that we're analyzing, we're billing for, and as a DSP grows and the sort of the potential problem scales, our billing model grows with it. And from a pricing standpoint, I mean, not to give away the rate card, but you're looking at a trade-off between building a full-time team internally that probably needs at a minimum 4 to 6 dedicated employees, and our contract on an annual basis would come in at half of that team's cost. So we think we're a really cost-effective solution, and that not only are we, I think today we would be as good or better than any sort of team that's out there, maybe save for the folks at Spotify who have really built a lot in this space. But also we're really cost effective, and we'll grow and get better with every new DSP that we bring on board. And so over time, the value is even going to increase like relative to the rates.
All right. Just a reminder to folks, if you have questions for Andrew or Morgan, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them at the end here. So how about with the labels? I mean, is this a separate business from what you're doing for the labels in terms of audits or facilitating or enhancing their ability to audit?
It's actually the same integration. It's just a different view and analysis on the data set. So we built an integration to track real time or up to real time. And so in one way for the labels, we can, if it's turned on, we take this data and it's completely anonymized. I have no idea that it's Morgan. The DSP still controls the cryptographic key pair. But what we know is, like, let's say Morgan's playing a song. The way our audit product works is the DSP says, hey, I recognize Morgan. He's played at least 30 seconds of the song. He hasn't played it more than 10 times in 24 hours. He's in a revenue generating location on a revenue generating tier. This one should count for royalty recognition. And then they cryptographically sign it. The label says, I see your signature and Morgan, and I agree. Ours does the same thing. So this is all happening in the background on every single play. So what you have is not just real-time reconciliation, but you have like the signature and the tracking component to it, like receipts. And so what's interesting is that on the audit side, you would look at that and mostly just check, like, as a checksum to say, were the usage reports correct? Like, if they said that Morgan did 100 million plays, did he actually do 100 million plays? Do we have signatures for 100 million, or was there 110 million? And there's like a whole host of reasons we don't have to go to now on why that could be incorrect. But one of the biggest ones is fraud, which has led us to the fraud product. So you have the same exact integration, only instead of reconciling it for a usage report, you're looking for pattern recognition and fraudulent behavior out of the same data set. And so it's the exact same real product, just it serves two different partners in a different way. And so it serves the DSPs to help them fight fraud. And that's where we built this entire fraud detection and analysis component. But it also can serve the labels if turned on. The DSPs have to agree for that. But when the DSPs agreed to turn that on as an audit provision, then we can provide that back to the labels with real-time, sort of audit ability for their usage reports. So it's the same tool, it's just slightly different, and we offer two different products to each side.
You mentioned the magic word before, crypto. It's the word of the hour these days. What role is crypto playing in what you're doing? I understand that your system leverages blockchain technology, at least on some level, without getting too into the weeds. How does that work?
We don't use crypto at all. There's no NFTs or cryptocurrency, but we do utilize the underlying blockchain technology. We actually built our own blockchain from the ground up. So it's a proprietary blockchain. We're not built on some other blockchain. It's ours. And the reason we did that was because when we first set out to do this, most blockchains are really slow. Like at the time, especially in 2018, Visa might have been the fastest with 40,000 transactions per second. If you broke out the amount of music people listen to, we would have to do at least 600,000 transactions per second at that time in 2018 to be able to do a true audit-like function. Because you can't just track one label's music, you have to track the entire ecosystem, the DSP. So we actually built a blockchain. We have 30-something patents in 6 countries on it. We have put a lot of effort and emphasis into security, and we wanted to make sure we had a really mature platform before we brought it out to market. And so that's really what we spent the first 18 months on, was building that out, testing different variations, trying to stress test our own systems. We went as far as building a streaming service of our own. And every time that we launch a new infrastructure piece, we stress test the system with 5.4 billion transactions in 90 minutes. So we just run through like just what would be the equivalent of the world streaming in 11 days. And we hit it as hard as we can to make sure that we can sustain that. And so there's a lot of blockchain elements.
Is it all Morgan's boy band that is getting played on that?
Mostly, a lot of it. Yeah.
I mean, if you heard it, you would understand why the demand it's outrageous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where have you had any discussions about this with various organizations within the industry? Like I'm thinking DEMA, the Digital Media Association here in the U.S. Which represents a number of the platforms. Have you had conversations with those sorts of folks? And is there anything you can share about how those have gone?
Yeah, I won't name names, but I'll say we've talked to most of the sort of trade associations domestically and a number of them abroad as well. I think the comment that we've heard that like we really appreciate is that while the conversation in sort of those meetings often comes to streaming fraud in particular, sometimes auditability as well, but streaming fraud in particular recently, very few companies have put something on the table that's a solution. And so the conversation has historically been a little bit circular, in part because, they're the members of those associations or the platforms themselves aren't necessarily keen to just share their data with one another for a whole bunch of competitive reasons. So the emergence of a third party and also putting some real meat on the bones and saying like, look, here's what we can do, and being able to show even in our first couple of pilots, like some tangible results above and beyond what the platforms were detecting themselves, has given, I think, those associations and those bodies something to bring to members to say, here, look, this isn't just abstract. This isn't philosophical about the benefits of sharing information and cooperating. It's actually, here's a platform that can do this, be good custodians of the data, respect the competitive nature of the relationships that platforms have with one another, but offer something that is, I think, like fundamentally almost a pre-competitive value to the industry, where rising tide really does lift all boats in this case, and you can keep competing for algorithmic playlists and user experience, but let's work on stamping out fraud collectively because there's value in that.
I mean, I would think, whether it's 10% or 20%, we're talking about real money here. So, there ought to be motivation there to deal with this in a systemic way, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're sort of coming up on time. Apparently, we've answered every possible question, because I'm not seeing questions in the Q&A. So what's on the roadmap? Where do we go from here? Where are you on funding?
Yeah, we just closed another funding round, or we're pretty well funded. We have runway for years. Most of the funding we just did now actually was to go faster. So we have a bunch of DSPs interested in processing all of that data. Can be quite expensive. So most of the funding we just did was really focused on server processing and being able to ingest billions of lines of code and analyze it in all these different ways and do the auditability component of that. So I would say we're well positioned from a capital perspective. Our team is excellent. We have world-class engineers. We've been really fortunate to have almost the best possible people around us that you can imagine. I would put them against, I've been in a lot of tech companies, and I think they outshine every tech company I've been in. They're all legitimate superstars. And so I think that we have the technical capability, we have the money, and we have DSPs now trusting us and sending us, a significant amount of data for analysis. And we've been returning those results back, and with, I won't call them alarming results, but like we found a lot of fraud. So, we found the fraud that they caught, and I think our accuracy was 99.8% of the fraud they caught, our system caught in the same afternoon, with an additional like X percentage of fraud. I won't give the number out, but it's a double-digit percentage additional fraud. to
And
what they had found.
what is their response when you give them those results? I mean, that must be somewhat dispiriting for.
No, I
for
think everyone's excited. I don't think it's like, the thing is, it makes them better. So not only do we say this is the fraud, but we also are trying to give them action items. Like, these are hijacked accounts. They just need a password reset. These are bots. You should actually probably kick these ones off your system. So when we identify fraud, there's actually a number of reasons why they're fraudulent and a suggested action that they can take.
So it's actionable information. You could take a DSP could take this information and take affirmative steps to try to address at least the fraud that you've discovered. Correct.
Exactly. And I think most people would be worried about, if you think about it, it's like, oh, we're going to work ourselves out of business, but not really. If you've ever been around fraudsters or seen it in other industries, like, it's whack-a-mole. As soon as we solve these 40 things, there's going to be 40 other ones we have to discover and find, because they will find new creative ways to do it. So our purpose is like, let's just be the sort of company that everyone can come to, where that is our mission on that product. We will solve this for you. You don't need to staff all of these people and all chase the same problem. Like, we can do that for the industry, and you focus on delivering really amazing content to your customers and your users, and we can help you stamp out fraud.
And has nobody tried to do this before? I mean, are you guys trailblazers in the sense that you're trying at least to promulgate an industry solution to an industry problem?
I think look, we stand on the shoulders of giants from other industries. We're not the first company in a space where there is sort of a material amount of suspicious activity and fraud. But I think we're first in music, save for the internal efforts of the platforms themselves. And, I think that's sort of a great place to be, where, teams have worked on this, they've identified the problem. There's sort of that sort of classic startup question of product market fit. The existence of an internal team at any company validates the question of product market fit. The next question is, can we do it in a more scalable and efficient way than an internal team can, and with a higher degree of accuracy? And I think that's what, we're confident, and the early results would suggest we can do. So yeah, we get the benefit of being first and learning from, the folks at Google and Verifin and other companies in other industries who have, done similar things. So it's not like inventing fire, but it's definitely applying that to a new space where no one's come before.
I also think it helps that we are actually music industry people. So I think a lot of times, from being in the music industry previously and before, like, I actually worked a lot on breaking artists in the 2000s using mostly social platforms. So I was one of the first people leveraging Facebook when it was still EDU based. I was one of the first people on Twitter. I really leveraged a lot of YouTube to break their algorithms for artists in the past. So I did a lot of this stuff in the 2000s till like 2012. Morgan obviously working on the copyright side. What I always saw in music was people from outside music thinking they understood the industry and coming in with technology that was not helpful, or with their own structure. And I think we might be the first team that was music first, became technologists, and like can actually deliver a product that's well suited for the music industry, as opposed to being outsiders trying to guess how the music industry works.
That's been a long-standing problem since the digital transformation. A lot of people from outside the industry claiming to solve problems inside the industry without necessarily the appropriate background. Question from Teddy Breck. We've sort of addressed it, but how do you and or your clients deal with fraud once it's identified? What is the actual process there?
Yeah, so sorry, I just had the chat blowing up my screen here, the whole window. So the process is fairly straightforward. I mean, we can deliver reporting back in a couple of different ways, web dashboard, but also just an API. And even if you want simply a CSV emailed with the accounts that you need to look at, obviously it's a hash. It's not the username or anything of that nature. But what we deliver back is the accounts that you should be looking at, the reason why, as Andrew said. So whether we think they're bots, or whether they're accounts that have been hijacked, or whether they're on for us, we're going to put them onto a watch list for future periods of data. So in some cases, if it's inconclusive, we're not going to tell you to do anything. We're just going to let you know, as the client and the partner, we're going to keep an eye on this cohort until they slot neatly into one of those buckets or they fall off. But ultimately, the DSP can then take that information about those accounts, and they can do, whether it's password resets or ban accounts, but also, and I think this is a really important point we didn't talk about earlier, the speed at which we can deliver results. So there is some, so let's call it some percentage, maybe it's 60 or 70% of the total suspicious activity, where we can deliver reporting back as quickly as you can get the data to us. And so that'll help you pull those tracks off if they're clearly suspicious off of internal recommendation engines and internal charting and playlists, so that you don't have that like organic sort of perception fraud motivation that Andrew was talking about early on. Then for the remaining, let's say 30-40% that takes a little longer to analyze, our goal is just to turn that around in time for sales reporting. So, one is what can you do with the accounts themselves? And the other thing is, what do you do with the tracks that are the targets to make sure that they aren't, basically harming the folks who are doing things the right way and organically gaining momentum and popularity as artists. And so that's really the action that DSPs can take based on the data we share back.
Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there. If there's any last minute question, speak or type now or forever hold your peace. If you have follow-up questions, I'm sure Morgan or Andrew would be happy to try to address them. How could people get in touch with you if they had questions, guys?
I dropped our emails in the chat. It's
okay.
just our first names at beatdapp.com, Morgan and Andrew at beatdapp.com. So feel free, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. This was a terrific discussion, and best of luck going forward. Ned?
All really appreciate it. Morgan, Andrew, great session, and thank you to a really engaged audience today. Love all the questions and comments throughout the show. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you at the next Let's Do Lunch. Thanks guys.
Paul. Thanks, Ned. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.